Normandy, France, June 5th, 1944, one day before D-Day. The rain hammered against the canvas tent like 1,000 angry fists. Inside, 23 young men from the 101st Airborne Division sat in near silence, cleaning their rifles, checking their parachutes, writing letters they hoped they'd never have to send. Private James Jimmy Hawthorne sat on his cot, his hands trembling as he tried to fold a photograph of his wife, Eleanor, and their 3-year-old daughter, Lily. The picture was worn at the edges from being held too many times. Eleanor's smile was radiant, frozen in that perfect afternoon at the county fair in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, just weeks before he shipped out. "You're going to wear a hole in that picture, Hawthorne," came a voice from across the tent. Jimmy looked up to see Corporal Daniel Fisher grinning at him, though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Danny was 24, 2 years older than Jimmy, with dark hair slicked back and a cigarette perpetually dangling from his lips. He was from Brooklyn, loud and brash, but he'd saved Jimmy's life twice during training. "Can't help it," Jimmy said quietly. "Just thinking about home." "We're all thinking about home, farm boy," Danny said, his voice softening. "But tomorrow we got to think about staying alive." Lieutenant Marcus Brennan stepped into the tent, water dripping from his helmet. He was 32, ancient by their standards, with a scar running down his left cheek from a training accident. His eyes swept over men. "Listen up," Brennan's voice cut through the drumming rain. "Intelligence just confirmed it. We drop tomorrow night, 0130 hours. Our objective is to secure the causeways behind Utah Beach before dawn. If we fail, thousands of men hitting that beach won't make it 50 yards inland." The weight of those words settled over the tent like a thick fog. "Check your gear. Double-check it. Then check it again," Brennan continued. "And Hawthorne, Fisher, I need you two on point when we land. You're both good in the dark, and we'll need that." Jimmy's stomach twisted. Point meant first in, first to fight, first to die if things went wrong. After Brennan left, Danny moved closer to Jimmy's cot, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You scared?" Danny asked. "Terrified," Jimmy admitted. "I keep thinking about Eleanor's last letter. She said Lily drew me a picture of our farm, a stick figure version of me standing in the cornfield." His voice cracked. "I promised her I'd come home, Danny. I promise." Danny was quiet for a long moment, then reached into his jacket and pulled out his own letter, unopened. "This came yesterday. From my kid brother, Tommy. He's 16, wants to enlist the minute he turns 17. Danny stared at the envelope. "I haven't opened it because if I read it, it'll make him real. And if something happens to me tomorrow and he's real, it'll hurt more." "You should read it," Jimmy said. "Maybe after we make it through tomorrow." 0130 hours. June 6, 1944. Over Normandy. The sea. 47 transport plane bucked violently as German anti-aircraft fire lit up the night sky like a deadly fireworks show. Inside, the 23 men were packed shoulder to shoulder, hooked to the static line, waiting for the green light. Jimmy's heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. The noise was deafening. The roar of the engines, the explosions outside, men shouting prayers in a dozen different ways. 30 seconds, the jump master screamed. Danny grabbed Jimmy's shoulder, shouting over the chaos. "Stay close when we land. Find each other. Green light. Go, go, go." Men poured out of the plane like water from a broken dam. When Jimmy's turn came, he didn't think. He just jumped into the screaming darkness. The parachute opened with a violent jerk. Below him, Normandy was on fire. Tracer rounds streaked through the sky. Planes were going down in flames. Men's parachutes were tangled or on fire. Jimmy hit the ground hard in what felt like a marsh. Cold water soaked through his uniform immediately. He frantically cut away his parachute, pulled out his rifle, and tried to orient himself. Crack! A bullet zipped past his head. He dove behind a hedgerow, his heart in his throat. Where was Danny? Where was anyone? A figure moved in the darkness. Jimmy raised his rifle, finger on the trigger. "Flash!" he hissed the password. "Thunder!" came the response. Danny emerged from the shadows, covered in mud, but alive. We're scattered to hell, Danny panted. I've seen 3 men from our company. Lieutenant Brennan's trying to rally everyone at the rally point, but the Germans are everywhere. For the next 2 hours, they moved through the French countryside, fighting in short, brutal engagements. By dawn, they'd linked up with 17 men from various units, a patchwork group commanded by Lieutenant Brennan. They reached their objective, Causeway No. 2, a narrow road elevated above flooded fields, crucial for vehicles to move inland from the beach. But the Germans had gotten there first. Causeway No. 2, 0600 hours. Lieutenant Brennan crouched behind a stone wall, studying the German position through binoculars. A machine gun nest was dug in at the far end of the causeway, with at least 15 soldiers fortifying the position. We have to take that nest, Brennan said grimly. Without this causeway, the tanks can't get through. And without tanks, our boys on the beach are sitting ducks. That's a suicide run. Private Rodriguez, a kid from Texas, muttered. Then we better make it count, Danny said, checking his ammunition. Brennan laid out the plan. It was simple because it had to be. Half the men would provide covering fire while 5 others, including Jimmy and Danny, would flank around to the marshland and hit the nest from the side. We move in 10 minutes, Brennan said. Jimmy pulled out Eleanor's photograph one more time. His hands weren't shaking anymore. A strange calm had settled over him. Danny noticed. You okay, farm boy? Yeah, Jimmy said. I was just thinking about promises. Danny opened his jacket and pulled out Tommy's letter, finally tearing it open. His eyes scanned the words, and his face went pale. What is it? Jimmy asked. Tommy, he says he got his draft papers. Lied about his age. He ships out in 3 weeks. Danny's voice was hollow. 3 weeks, Jimmy. He's going to end up right here, in this hell. Then we survive this, Jimmy said firmly. We survive, we go home, and you tell him what it's really like. You stop him. If we survive, Danny whispered. When we survive. But as they moved into position, as the German machine gun opened fire and bullets tore through the morning air, Jimmy saw it. Danny was about to move into the open, right into the machine gun's line of fire. Everything slowed down. Jimmy saw the trajectory, saw where Danny was going, saw the certain death waiting there. And in that split second, Jimmy made a choice. He grabbed Danny's arm and whispered for words that would haunt Danny Fisher for the rest of his life. Take my place. Go home. Before Danny could react, Jimmy shoved him backward into cover and sprinted forward into the killing zone. Causeway No. 2, 0615 hours, June 6, 1944. Danny Fisher hit the muddy ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. For a fraction of a second, he didn't understand what had happened. Then he heard it. The horrific staccato of the German MG-42 machine gun, the weapon the soldiers call Hitler's buzzsaw because of its terrifying rate of fire. He scrambled to his knees and looked up just in time to see Jimmy Hawthorne running to the open field, zigzagging between tracer rounds that lit up the dawn like deadly fireflies. Jimmy, no! Danny screamed, but his voice was swallowed by the thunder of gunfire. Jimmy made it 15 yards. 20. 25. Then he stumbled, his left leg buckling. He'd been hit, but impossibly, incredibly, Jimmy kept moving. He pulled a grenade from his belt, yanked the pin with his teeth like they'd practiced 1,000 times, and with a final surge of strength, hurled it toward the German machine gun nest. The explosion was immediate and devastating. The machine gun went silent. Jimmy collapsed face first into the mud, covering fire. Now! Lieutenant Brennan roared. The remaining American soldiers unleashed everything they had at the disoriented German position. Danny didn't think. He just ran. He sprinted across that same deadly ground, sliding into the crater where Jimmy lay motionless. Jimmy, stay with me. Danny rolled him over. Blood. So much blood. Jimmy had been hit 3 times, once in the leg, once in the side, and once in the shoulder. His eyes were barely open, his breathing shallow and rattling. Danny. Jimmy's voice was barely a whisper. Did I get them? You got them, you crazy son of a bitch. You got them. Danny pressed his hands against the worst wound, trying to stop the bleeding, but it poured between his fingers. Medic. We need a medic. Private Leonard Doc Morrison, a 25-year-old medic from Pennsylvania, came sliding into the crater, his aid bag already open. How bad? Doc asked, already assessing. Bad, Danny said, his voice breaking. Doc worked with practiced efficiency, injecting morphine, applying pressure bandages. But even Danny could see it in his eyes, the look that said there's only so much I can do. Eleanor, Jimmy whispered. Tell her I kept my promise. Tell her I tried to come home. You are coming home. Danny gripped Jimmy's hand. You hear me? You're going home. You've got to meet Lily, remember? She drew you a picture. A weak smile crossed Jimmy's face. The cornfield, I can see it, Danny. I can see the corn growing tall. Eleanor's waiting. Don't you dare! Danny's voice cracked. Don't you dare leave. Jimmy, you saved my life. 3 times now. You don't get to die. I won't let you. The firefight continued around them. Lieutenant Brennan and the others were pushing forward, clearing out the remaining German soldiers. The causeway was being secured. The mission was succeeding. But Jimmy Hawthorne was dying in Danny Fisher's arms. Danny! Jimmy's grip tightened with surprising strength. Tommy, save Tommy. Don't let him come here. Promise me. I promise, Danny sobbed. I promise, Jimmy. I'll save him. Good. Jimmy's eyes focused one last time on Danny's face. Take my place. Tell them I was brave. You're the bravest man I ever knew. Jimmy Hawthorne died at 0627 hours on June 6, 1944, holding the hand of the man whose life he'd saved, 15 yards from German lines, on a muddy causeway in Normandy, France. He was 22 years old. 3 days later, Field Hospital, Normandy. Danny sat on a cot in the field hospital, physically uninjured but unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to stop seeing Jimmy's face. In his pocket, he carried 2 letters now, Tommy's unopened one, and the letter Jimmy had been writing to Eleanor, found in his jacket, unfinished. My dearest Eleanor, tomorrow we make the jump. I'm not supposed to tell you where or when, but you'll know soon enough. I want you to know that every moment I've been away from you and Lily, I've carried you both in my heart. You are my reason for everything. If I don't make it back, the letter ended there. Jimmy never got to finish it. Lieutenant Brennan entered the tent, his arm in a sling from a wound he'd taken during the push inland. Fisher, Brennan said quietly, how you holding up? I'm alive, sir, because of him. Brennan sat down heavily on the cot beside him. I've been doing this since North Africa. I've lost a lot of good men. But what Hawthorne did out there, that was something different. He didn't just take out that gun. He saved the entire operation for that sector. Command estimates his actions saved maybe 200 lives on Utah Beach. 200 lives for one. The math of war was brutal and senseless. I have to write to his wife, Danny said, but I don't know what to say. How do I tell her that her husband died because he took my place? How do I tell her it should have been me? You tell her the truth, Brennan said firmly. You tell her that her husband was a hero, that he made a choice, a brave choice, and that choice mattered. And then, Fisher, you do something harder. What's that, sir? You live. You survive this war. You go home. And you make damn sure his sacrifice meant something. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, July 15th, 1944. Eleanor Hawthorne was hanging laundry in the backyard when she saw the Western Union boy on his bicycle turning down their dirt road. Her hands went numb. The clothespin fell into the grass. She knew. Somehow she knew. The telegram was brief, clinical, devastating. The Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret that your husband, Private James Hawthorne, was killed in action on 6 June in France. She read it 3 times, but the words didn't change. Eleanor's mother, Martha, found her 20 minutes later, sitting on the porch steps, the telegram clutched in her hand, dry-eyed and silent. 3-year-old Lily was playing in the yard, chasing butterflies, oblivious. Eleanor, Martha's voice broke. He's not coming home, Mama, Eleanor said in a voice that didn't sound like hers. He promised me he'd come home, and he's not coming home. The tears came then, a flood of grief so deep it felt like drowning. 2 weeks later, the letter. Eleanor received a package from the War Department. Jimmy's personal effects, his dog tags, his watch, stopped at 6:27. The photograph of her and Lily, now stained with mud and something darker, and a letter. But it wasn't from Jimmy. It was from someone named Corporal Daniel Fisher. Eleanor's hands shook as she opened it. Dear Mrs. Hawthorne, my name is Danny Fisher. I serve with your husband in the 101st Airborne. I don't know if he ever mentioned me in his letters, but if he did, he probably called me that loudmouth from Brooklyn who can't shut up. I am writing to you because I need you to know something that the telegram couldn't tell you, that the official reports won't say. Your husband didn't just die in action. He chose to save my life. On June 6, we were tasked with taking a German machine gun position. It was a dangerous run, and I was about to move into position when Jimmy grabbed me and said, "Take my place. Go home." Before I could stop him, he pushed me to safety and ran into enemy fire himself. He destroyed that gun. He saved our mission. Command estimates his actions saved 200 American lives that day. But Mrs. Hawthorne, he saved MY life specifically. He looked at me, his friend, and decided I was worth dying for. I can't explain why he did it. Maybe he saw something in me worth saving. Maybe he was just that kind of man, the kind who puts others first without thinking twice. But I need you to know that his last words to me were about you and Lily. He said to tell you he kept his promise. He said to tell you he tried to come home. Mrs. Hawthorne, your husband was the bravest man I have ever known. He died a hero, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what he did for me. I made him a promise before he died. He asked me to save my younger brother Tommy from coming to this war. I intend to keep that promise, no matter what it takes. If you ever need anything at all, I will be there. This is a debt I can never repay, but I will spend my life trying. With deepest respect and sorrow, Corporal Daniel Fisher. Eleanor read the letter 5 times. Then she folded it carefully, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "Thank you, Danny Fisher. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for being his friend." Brooklyn, New York, August 10th, 1944. Danny stood outside his family's brownstone apartment in Brooklyn, his duffel bag on his shoulder. He was on a 2-week leave before shipping back out. He'd survived Normandy. He'd survived the push through France. But he hadn't yet faced his brother. The door flew open before he could knock. His mother, Rosa Fisher, a small Italian woman with graying hair and fierce eyes, pulled him into a crushing embrace. "Daniel, my baby, you're home." She kissed his face a dozen times, switching rapidly between English and Italian. His father, Samuel Fisher, a quiet man who worked at the docks, gripped his shoulder firmly, his eyes wet. "Welcome home, son." And then there was Tommy. Thomas Fisher stood in the hallway, 17 years old, skinny and tall, wearing a new Army uniform. Danny's blood went cold. "Tommy, what the hell are you wearing?" "I'm shipping out next week," Tommy said, his voice trying to sound brave but cracking slightly. "North Africa," they said. "Maybe Italy." "No." Danny dropped his duffel bag. "No, absolutely not. You're 16. You lied to enlist. I'm 17 now. I had a birthday last month. You're still a kid. I'm the same age you were when you enlisted." Tommy shot back. Danny crossed the room and grabbed Tommy by the shoulders. "Listen to me. Listen very carefully. You are not going to war. I don't care what you signed. I don't care what they told you. I am going to fix this. You can't stop me, Danny. This is my choice." "Your choice." Danny's voice rose. "Do you know what your choice means? Do you want to know what war is really like, Tommy? It's watching your friends die in your arms. It's mud and blood and screaming. It's—" "Daniel," Rosa interrupted. "Not here. Not like this." But Danny couldn't stop. All the grief, all the guilt, all the horror of the past 2 months came pouring out. "I watched a man die because he took my place, Tommy. A man with a wife and a daughter. A good man. A better man than me. He died so I could live, and now I have to carry that for the rest of my life. Is that what you want? Is that the glory you're looking for? Tommy's face had gone pale. Danny, I made him a promise, Danny said, his voice breaking. I promised Jimmy Hawthorne that I would save you, and I'm not going to break that promise. I can't. Samuel stepped forward. Danny, sit down. Let's talk about this. But Danny was already moving. He had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find a way to get Tommy's enlistment reversed. 2 weeks to keep the promise he'd made to a dying man in a muddy crater in France. He would not fail. He could not fail. Because if Tommy died, if Tommy went to war and didn't come home, then Jimmy Hawthorne's sacrifice would mean nothing. And Danny Fisher would be carrying 2 ghosts instead of 1. Brooklyn, New York, August 12, 1944. 2 days later. Danny Fisher sat in a cramped office at the Army Recruitment Center in downtown Brooklyn, facing Sergeant Major Harold Peterson, a grizzled man in his 50s with a chest full of medals from the Great War. Behind him on the wall hung a poster. Uncle Sam wants you. Let me get this straight, Corporal, Peterson said, leaning back in his chair. You want me to reverse your brother's enlistment because you made a promise to a dead man? Not just any man, sir, Danny said, keeping his voice steady. Private James Hawthorne. He died taking out a German machine gun nest on D-Day. He saved 200 lives. He saved MY life. And his last request was that I keep my kid brother out of this war. Peterson studied him for a long moment. Your brother lied about his age? He was 16 when he enlisted. He turned 17 last month. That's still legal enlistment age with parental consent. My parents didn't know until he showed up in uniform, Danny said. They never signed anything. He forged their signatures. Peterson's eyebrows rose. That's a serious accusation. You have proof. Danny pulled out a document he'd obtained from his mother, her actual signature on Tommy's birth certificate, compared to the signature on the parental consent form. They weren't even close. Peterson examined both papers carefully. Well, I'll be damned. This is fraud. Sir, my brother is a good kid, but he's got this idea in his head that war is about glory and heroism. He doesn't understand what it really is. He'll get himself killed in the first week. And you think you can stop him? Even if I reverse this, he'll just turn 18 eventually. He'll enlist again. Then I'll have a year to show him the truth, Danny said firmly. A year to help him understand. Sir, I've been in combat. I've seen what happens to kids who think they're invincible. They die stupid deaths. Preventable deaths. Tommy is smart. If I can just get him to think instead of react, maybe he'll survive this war when he does eventually go. Peterson was quiet for a moment, then opened a drawer and pulled out his own photograph. 2 young men in Army uniforms from 1918. This is my brother William, Peterson said quietly. He was 17 when he enlisted for the First World War. Lied about his age, too. I was 25. Try to watch out for him. He paused. He died at Belleauwood 3 weeks after we deployed. Walked right into a machine gun nest because he thought he was bulletproof. Danny's throat tightened. So yeah, Corporal Fisher, I understand promises to dead men, Peterson continued. I'll start the paperwork to invalidate your brother's enlistment based on fraudulent documentation. It'll take about a week. But you better use that year wisely, because when he turns 18, there won't be a damn thing anyone can do to stop him. Thank you, sir, Danny said, relief flooding through him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still have to tell your brother he's being discharged. Something tells me he won't take it well. Fisher family apartment. That evening, Tommy stood in the kitchen, his face flushed with rage, as Danny explained what he'd done. You went behind my back? Tommy shouted. You had me discharged? Yes, Danny said calmly. Because you lied. You forged Ma and Pop's signatures. You committed fraud. I did what I had to do to serve my country. You did what you had to do to play soldier. Danny shot back. This isn't a game, Tommy. This isn't some adventure. I know that. No, you don't. Danny's voice rose. You know what you see in the newsreels and the propaganda posters. You don't know what it smells like when your friend bleeds out in your arms. You don't know what it sounds like when men scream for their mothers as they die. You don't know. Then tell me. Tommy's voice cracked. You come home and you won't talk about it. You just brood and drink and have nightmares. If it's so horrible, then tell me so I understand. The kitchen went silent. Rose and Samuel stood in the doorway, watching their sons face each other. Danny sat down heavily at the kitchen table, his hands shaking. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. His name was Jimmy Hawthorne. He was 22. From Iowa. He had a wife named Eleanor and a little girl named Lily who was 3 years old. He showed me her picture every single day. Every single day. He'd pull out that picture and tell me about his farm, about the corn growing tall, about how he promised Eleanor he'd come home. Tommy sat down across from him, silent now. On D-Day, we were taking a German machine gun position. Danny continued. I was supposed to be on point. I was going to run across an open field under fire. Jimmy saw it. He saw that I was about to die. And you know what he did? Danny looked up at his brother, tears streaming down his face. He grabbed me. He whispered, "Take my place. Go home." And he pushed me out of the way and ran into that killing zone himself. He got hit 3 times. 3 times, Tommy. And he still kept going. He threw a grenade, took out that gun, and then collapsed. Danny pulled out Jimmy's photograph, now stained and worn, and placed it on the table. He died in my arms, right there in the mud. And you know what his last words were? Save Tommy. Don't let him come here. He was dying, and he was thinking about you, about some kid he'd never met, who was my brother, and how I needed to save you. Tommy stared at the photograph, his face pale. So, yeah, I went behind your back, Danny said, because I made a promise to a man who died in my place, and I will not break that promise. You want to serve? Fine. When you turn 18, I can't stop you, but you're going to do it with your eyes open. You're going to train properly. You're going to think, not just react. And maybe you'll survive. Tommy reached out and touched the photograph gently. I'm sorry, Tommy whispered. I didn't know. Now you do. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, August 20th, 1944. Eleanor Hawthorne stood in the cornfield behind her house, watching Lily chase grasshoppers through the tall green stalks. The corn was growing well this year. Her father-in-law, Robert Hawthorne, had taken over most of the farm work since Jimmy left, and now since he wasn't coming home. She held Danny Fisher's letter in her hand. She'd read it so many times the paper was starting to wear thin at the creases. He chose to save my life. Eleanor didn't know how to feel about Danny Fisher. Part of her was grateful that Jimmy's sacrifice meant something, that it saved someone. But another part of her, the angry, grieving part, wanted to scream. Why did it have to be my husband? Why did your life matter more than his? But that wasn't fair. She knew it wasn't fair. Jimmy had made a choice. A brave, selfless, impossible choice. And now she had to live with it. Mama! Lily came running up, holding a grasshopper cupped in her tiny hands. Look, I caught one. Eleanor knelt down and looked at the insect. That's wonderful. Sweetheart, are you going to keep him? No, Lily said seriously. Daddy says we should let wild things be free. He told me that before he left. Eleanor's heart cracked a little more. Yes, he did say that. Lily opened her hands, and the grasshopper leaped away into the corn. Then she looked up at her mother with Jimmy's blue eyes. When is Daddy coming home? Eleanor had been dreading this question, dodging it for weeks, but she couldn't anymore. Baby, Daddy isn't coming home, Eleanor said gently, pulling Lily into her arms. Daddy was very brave, and he helped a lot of people. But he got hurt, and he can't come back to us. Is he in heaven? Yes, sweetheart, he's in heaven. Can we visit him? Not yet, but someday. Someday we'll see him again. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this with the simple logic of a 3-year-old. Then she said, Will he remember me? Eleanor's tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Oh, baby, yes. He will always remember you. You were the most important thing in the whole world to him. They sat there in the cornfield, mother and daughter, mourning a man who would never walk these roads again, never see Lily grow up, never grow old with Eleanor. But even in her grief, Eleanor made a silent promise. She would make sure Lily knew who her father was, what he'd done, how much he'd loved them. Jimmy Hawthorne would not be forgotten. Somewhere in France, September 3rd, 1944, Danny Fisher sat in a muddy foxhole, writing a letter by the light of a shielded candle. Around him, the war continued. Distant artillery rumbled. Men talked in low voices. Someone played a harmonica badly. He'd survived Normandy. He'd survived the push through France. Every day he woke up alive felt like borrowed time. Dear Tommy, I'm writing to you from somewhere in France. I can't tell you exactly where because of censors, but know that I'm alive and thinking of you. I know you're angry at me for getting your enlistment reversed. I know you think I'm treating you like a kid. Maybe I am. But here's the truth. I need you to be smarter than I was. I need you to be better than I was. When you turn 18, and I know you will enlist again, I want you to promise me something. Promise me you'll go to officer candidate school. Get yourself trained properly. Learn strategy, leadership, how to keep your men alive. Don't just be another rifleman running into bullets. Be someone who can make a difference, who can think his way through battles instead of just reacting. I'm sending you a book, Infantry Tactics and Combat Leadership. It's what Lieutenant Brennan uses. Study it. When you do enlist, be prepared. Be smart. Most importantly, promise me you'll come home. Because I've seen too many good men die, Tommy. I've carried their ghosts. I don't want to carry yours too. Stay safe. Stay smart. And know that everything I did because I love you. Your brother, Danny. He sealed the letter and added it to the outgoing mail pile. Then he pulled out Jimmy's photograph, the one he now carried along with his own family pictures. I kept my promise, Jimmy, Danny whispered into the darkness. Tommy's safe, at least for now. The wind carried his words away into the French night. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, November 11th, 1945. Over a year later, Victory Day. The war in Europe had been over since May. The war in the Pacific had ended in August. The world was celebrating peace. But for those who'd lost someone, the celebrations rang hollow. Eleanor stood at Jimmy's grave in the Cedar Rapids Cemetery. The headstone was simple. Private James Hawthorne, 1922 to 1944. Beloved husband and father. He gave his tomorrow for our today. Lily, now 4.5, placed a small American flag by the stone. Like Eleanor had taught her. I drew Daddy a picture, Lily said, placing a piece of paper weighted down with a rock. It showed stick figures, a man, a woman, and a little girl, standing in a cornfield under a smiling sun. That's beautiful, baby, Eleanor said. Do you think he can see it from heaven? I know he can. A voice spoke behind them. Mrs. Hawthorne? Eleanor turned to see a young man in a civilian suit, holding his hat nervously. He was tall, with dark hair and a Brooklyn accent. Yes. I'm Danny Fisher, he said quietly. I wrote you a letter about your husband. Eleanor's breath caught. Corporal Fisher. Just Danny now. I got discharged 2 months ago. He looked at Jimmy's grave, his eyes wet. I had to come. I had to see. I had to pay my respects. Eleanor studied him. This man her husband had died to save. He looked thin, haunted, carrying his own ghosts. Thank you for coming, she said softly. I'm sorry, Danny said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry that I... Don't, Eleanor said firmly. Don't apologize for being alive. Jimmy made his choice. He chose you. And I've spent 1.5 years trying to make peace with that choice. Have you? Eleanor looked at Lily, then back at Danny. I think I have, because I realized something. If Jimmy had come home and found out that someone had died because he didn't help, it would have destroyed him. He was that kind of man. He couldn't stand by and watch someone die if he could prevent it. She stepped closer to Danny. So you need to understand something, Mr. Fisher. My husband didn't die for you. He died being himself. Being the man I fell in love with. The man who would give everything for others. And I have to believe that matters. I have to believe that his goodness continues through you. Danny wiped his eyes. I've tried. God, I've tried to be worthy of it. I saved my brother, kept my promise to Jimmy. Tommy's in college now, studying to be a teacher. He enlisted when he turned 18, but by then the war was over. He never had to fight. Then Jimmy's sacrifice saved 2 lives. Eleanor said, yours and Tommy's. Danny knelt down next to Lily. Hi there. You must be Lily. Lily nodded shyly. Your daddy was my best friend, Danny said gently. He told me all about you, about how you like to draw pictures and chase butterflies. Did you know my daddy was brave? Lily asked. He was the bravest man I ever knew, Danny said. And you know what? Every time I look at my little brother, every time I see him safe and happy, I think of your daddy, because your daddy is the reason Tommy's alive. Danny reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden carving, a detailed miniature of a farm and a house, a barn and rows of corn. I made this, Danny said, handing it to Lily. I'm not much of an artist, but I wanted you to have something. Your daddy used to tell me about your farm all the time. He loved it. He loved you. And I wanted you to have something to remember that. Lily held the carving carefully, her eyes wide. It's beautiful, Mr. Fisher, Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for the letter, for coming here, for remembering him. I'll never forget him, Mrs. Hawthorne. Never. They stood together at Jimmy's grave, the widow, the daughter, and the man who lived because of a whispered promise in the dark. The sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the cornfield beyond the cemetery. The corn had been harvested, the stalks cut down, but come spring, they would grow again. Life would continue. And Jimmy Hawthorne's legacy would live on through the people he'd saved and the love he'd left behind. Brooklyn, New York, December 24th, 1945, Christmas Eve. The Fisher family apartment was warm and loud, filled with the smell of roses cooking and the sound of laughter. Tommy sat at the table, telling stories about college to their younger cousins. He was 19 now, confident, alive. Danny stood by the window, looking out at the Brooklyn streets decorated with Christmas lights. In his hand, he held 2 photographs, one of Jimmy with Eleanor and Lily, and one of his own family. You okay? Tommy asked, coming to stand beside him. Yeah, Danny said, just thinking. About him. Always. Tommy put his hand on Danny's shoulder. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, about Private Hawthorne, about what he did. And I realized something, Tommy said. You told me that story to scare me, to show me how horrible war is. But what I took from it was something different. What's that? That there are people in this world willing to sacrifice everything for others. People like him. People like you. Tommy's voice was serious now, mature in a way that made Danny's heart ache. You saved my life too, Danny. Maybe not on a battlefield, but you saved me from making a stupid mistake. You kept your promise to him. And I promise you, I'm going to make that mean something. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to help kids. I'm going to make the world better because you gave me the chance to. Danny pulled his brother into a hug. He would have liked that. I wish I could have met him. Me too, kid. Me too. Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Same night. Eleanor and Lily sat by their Christmas tree, a small, modest pine decorated with homemade ornaments. On the mantel was Jimmy's photograph in his army uniform, flanked by candles. Mama, do you think Daddy can see us? Lily asked. I think so, sweetheart. Do you think he's happy? Eleanor looked at her daughter. Jimmy's eyes, Jimmy's smile, Jimmy's legacy. I think he's at peace, Eleanor said, and I think he's proud of us. She thought of Danny Fisher's visit, of the wooden carving now sitting on Lily's shelf, of the letter she'd read 100 times. He chose to save my life. And in making that choice, Jimmy had created ripples that spread far beyond that muddy causeway in France. He'd saved Danny. Danny had saved Tommy. Tommy would teach hundreds of children. Those children would grow up and make their own choices, touch their own lives. One act of selfless courage, spreading outward like light. Merry Christmas, Jimmy, Eleanor whispered into the quiet room. We miss you. We love you, and we'll make sure the world remembers what you did." Outside, snow began to fall softly over Iowa, covering the fields in white, peaceful and still. The war was over, the fallen were honored, and the promise was kept. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, June 6, 1984, 40th anniversary of D-Day. Lily Hawthorne Morrison, now 43 years old with children of her own, stood at a podium in Cedar Rapids City Hall. Behind her was a large photograph of her father in uniform, young and smiling. The room was packed with veterans' families, and local officials gathered for a D-Day memorial ceremony. "I never knew my father," Lily began, her voice steady. "Private James Hawthorne died when I was 3 years old, on a causeway in Normandy, saving lives he would never meet. But I've spent my entire life getting to know him through the people he touched." She looked out at the audience and found Thomas Fisher, now 59, a retired high school principal from Brooklyn, sitting in the front row with his wife and 4 children. "My father whispered for words that changed everything. Take my place. Go home." He said them to Corporal Daniel Fisher, who became a lifelong friend to our family until his death last year. Lily's voice caught. "Danny spent 40 years making sure my father's sacrifice mattered. He raised a good family. He saved his brother, who went on to teach thousands of students. He visited my mother every year until she passed in 1978. And he never, not once, let us forget the man who gave us tomorrow for their today." She held up the wooden carving Danny had made, worn smooth by decades of handling. "This is what heroism looks like. Not a single grand gesture, but the ripple effects of love and sacrifice spreading outward through generations. My father saved Danny Fisher. Danny Fisher saved his brother Tommy. Tommy taught students who became doctors, teachers, engineers, parents. Those students raised children who are now contributing to the world. The mathematics of sacrifice are infinite." Lily looked directly at Tommy Fisher. "Mr. Fisher, thank you for letting your family story be part of ours. Thank you for honoring my father by living well." Tommy stood, tears streaming down his weathered face, and saluted. The entire room rose in standing ovation. Somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this world, Private James Hawthorne smiled. His promise had been kept. His sacrifice had mattered, and his story would be told for generations to come.